Y'all be, man. My hairless fellow minx of the blue sea. It's me, we back. I didn't think I'd be talking on for another week or so. I did have some plans to do a few things earlier this week, but I know it is for a lot of people. It just didn't seem. It would just seem better to wait, right, until after the new year, maybe. But we get the hot and fresh. I wasn't even aware that was. I don't know. I just didn't expect it. So yeah, let's get into it, man. 1036, Bushido is the way of death. And that's kind of like a callback all the way to Zoro and the Baratier, right? When he talked about, as soon as I picked up a sword, man, I already threw my life away, right? And obviously that's not what they're talking about, but that theme has been throughout the story. And I thought we'd get more cover because of us starting a new cover story, but I was like, no, 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 I'm gonna make you wait a little bit on this whole German situation. So it is what it is with that, right? Seeing Jinbei on another cover is always cool. Now, of course, we already knew last chapter that this fight was a wrap. These fights have been short and to the point, and obviously, and I just want to bring this up because I have this talk with people from time to time about this difference between anime and manga and what they've been doing, particularly in Wano. And you have to think about the pacing, which is, that can be wow. But do you want this to end in the same fashion that Bleach had to, right? Between health and because people forget, man, there was a time when the big three were being purged, right? They wanted to bring in the new generation of stuff, which makes sense. You got to have a generation change at some point, right? But we all know, man, one of the reasons Bleach took 10 years to come back was, I'm sure, a certain taste in Kubo's mouth pause about how things had to end to begin with. And there was stuff that people didn't know that came out a little later where we were like, whoa, it was like that. And it was like, yeah, it was like that. So, fights not being in the super detail lately, which we all know hasn't really been the thing the entire story. I don't mind this route to an extent. I just have to prepare my mind for it. That usually when we see a fight now, it'll be more in detail in anime, and that kind of helps them kill filler at the same time, right? By extending fights. So you know, it seems like nothing really happened, no pun intended, in the Zoro and King fight. When you think about the actual choreography, like the killer, right? The killer fight in Zoro, compared to the manga, it was way better in the anime. It's just how the fights have been. And so, the fundamentals of what I wanted to see from the Senpai of the Sancho, you hailing in from the south side of Shimosuki Village. Personally, I'm satisfied. Though I understand other people's arguments, but I just kind of want to talk about that because I know sometimes it makes it seem like I ignore certain things, and that's certainly not the case. I'm heavily critical in a lot of areas. But when you understand how business works and having a staff, and again, this man's health and how many years this has been, it is what it is, right? Think about how many times I come to talk to you. Most of the time, I only plan on talking to you for 15 minutes and it ends up half an hour, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes, 4 hours in a week. The story's the same way. So, um, there's times, like I said, the pacing is whatever, but I like chapters like this where even though we skipped to like 8 different things, it didn't feel forced and they all made sense because they were all plot points that we all need an ends to the means, right? On where they were going. And I don't know how I feel about the time limit thing. We talk about time and suspense, right? With Onigashima blowing up or whatever, but I don't know. We'll see, right? Obviously, week to week and reading an arc straight through is a different experience, but particularly with Wano, the past 30 or 40 chapters, I haven't noticed the difference. That's how dope it's been for me personally. But yeah, I've had that question a few times, so I just figure, well, there must be more people who have that question, so I figure I'd address that. Um, anyway, King, right? This part of the backstory is cool because it gets into questions that we had. Like, one, was Kaido frustrated, or is he trying to force himself to be Joy Boy. Did he know about this? And, so on and so forth. We talked about that a couple weeks ago and a few times about Wano with the statements. This makes it look like he knows for sure that he isn't, right? Or he knows a lot more about what that means than even what we thought, right? I thought like maybe he's having an identity crisis, or again, him not being, does him being an Oni have anything to do with it? Is it a humanity thing, a species thing, right? Or is it just because he's all powerful but he can't beat Joy Boy, right? Because it was fate didn't choose him, or however you want to word that. He doesn't seem like he even has that mentality to begin with. It was just based on last chapter, his statement. But from King's standpoint, he probably did think that, and Kyle was like, "You really think I'm Joy Boy? That's crazy, man." You know what I mean? It was probably more like that. So I do like that that part got explained, because I was a little confused about if that was a possibility, but it doesn't seem to be. I do like the King says it doesn't matter if you are not. So that means neither one of them don't have that, confusion, right? He still believes in Kaido regardless of who he is, title wise, right? To him, it's all the same. Um, Now, having a Lunarian talk about Joy Boy for obvious reasons is a bit more interesting, because we don't know when King was captured. We don't know what happened when and what happened to the Lunarians, only what we can assume. If it's something that King witnessed as a child and not just lore, the history of his species, similar to what Robin went through, if Robin were to meet other people from O'Hara, right, that for whatever reason still exist, because they may have just been away, right, or they're still alive, right? Maybe there's a few out there, or they're younger and they don't know that they're O'Haran. Robin would be the person to pass the history of their people down to them. So in this case, that would be the same thing for King, where maybe things happen during the startup again back in the voice century, like most things, and he just is aware of the story and aware of how risky his life has been up until that point. Maybe he had been running his whole life and he finally got captured. They're young, as we've seen, or he was born into captivity. Who knows? It's with the world government, you have no idea. It could be either or, right? You can't trust them from what we've seen. You just can't. So from his standpoint, seeing somebody like Kaido to him would be a joy boy, and it's similar to the Who's Who situation, because Who's Who was looking for a savior. Now, Who's Who, his reason was a bit different, right? And he wasn't a child; he was already a grown man with different wants and things of that nature, and greed and so on and so forth. So he didn't really care about the philosophy of it, right? He didn't have any emotional tie to it. It was just him wanting to save himself. That's all he cared about, right? Um, but he still reached to the conclusion that that was a possibility, and all of a sudden his life is in danger, right? And even now, we don't know if he's dead already, and I'll get to that in a minute because of the panel we see. And it's very weird, right? Because we don't know how Kaido has been captured many times, but we don't know where his past started. He's an Oni, right? And because of some of the things he said about humanity as a whole, what did his goal have something to do that was anti-human in nature? Because Kaido doesn't seem like that kind of guy, but we've had a couple of chapters with him and Yamato, right, specifically, where he talks about humans a certain way. It's just that he respects strength so much, he didn't care that Odin was a human. He just found it intriguing, right? Like with the scabbards, it's intriguing. Maybe not something he Maybe Big Bomb is like the only human he's ever respected in a sense, right? Just due to strength alone. But if you look at the Beast Pirates, besides the fighter, none of them are human. Zones are still humans, but you get my point, right? He's a representative of something different. And that might be because subjugation is due to, from what we've seen so far, the worst species, right? As far as atrocities, have all been human based. There haven't been other races, right? I'm sure like not all fishmen are good or all minks are good, but they're not out here subjugating from what we've seen. All the history of the subjugation in this verse has been human based, or whatever you consider the celestial space elements, because they consider humans lowly too. But I mean, they're human form, and like they're based on humans. So I'm still not sure what's up with that. That might be a what do you call those people? Those people that um, They think they're gods and stuff like that. They usually, I don't need to get into that. You know what I mean? But so seeing all that through King's backstory and then King still getting clapped, it's like, well, that's exactly what happened to Zoro early in the story, right? It's just different for King because he's in a different part of his pirate career, and so is Kaido. And he was the number two, well, the number one person picked, but he's the number two of the crew, period, like point blank. And you even see how he behaves. If Kaido's not in charge, clearly it must be King. He's the most rational. Queen has too many other agendas, right? That we don't need to get into, but he has other agendas that have nothing to do with running the crew or doing what he's supposed to do, right? He's more worried about what he got going on. King's not like that. Similar now, Sanji's not like that either, but he can't get distracted, right? Zoro doesn't really get distracted from the goal. He'll get lost, but he won't get distracted. So they're similar in that manner. And the will of the new generation is a bit different, right? Like Zoro said, you guys been in power, man. You've been sitting there. We never got to even get to the table. We weren't even allowed in the building. We weren't even allowed on the street. You guys wouldn't even Uber Eats y'all food to us. But no more, man. No more. So I'm really liking that. I like the backstory part because we know the outside world of Onigashima is going to be extremely important, as we've seen in this chapter throughout, little things mentioned here and there. So, yeah, that's been dope. And the fact that this is when we're going to get into Cypher Bowl stuff. Zoro and King's fight was monitored, obviously. Earlier, when we seen the room, after the Derby had Cypher Polkai and the Dr. Seuss man Cypher Polkai left to attempt to go after Robin. They showed the room and Bao Huang was by herself. So I assumed Urahara Kisuke had Cypher Polkai and went after Who's Who. We've seen that room at least once or twice since then, right? And there's been nobody in there. Now he's in here. So I don't know if that was done on purpose. We just couldn't see him, or did he go take care of Who's Who? Because they made that seem like that was an important plot point to them. Like that's literally the only reason why they're there in Wano in the first place, right? The plans changed because they found out about Robin, but should have been always implied that it's always on site with Robin, like what we talked about in the first place with that whole situation. So it's like, well, wait a minute, did you take care of Who's Who already? What's going on with that? Why are we acting like that's not? Because especially when we talk about the beginning of the chapter with King talking about the sun god Nika, and it's just like, well, or George Boy in a sense. I mean, that ties right in with Who's Who. So I'm just not sure how he's back in the room because we knew it did make. This is the first thing I brought up. I'm like, well, somebody has to stay and relay information for Rob Lucci about what's going on in Roof Piece and just the overall situation, especially with them talking about annexing Wano, supposedly, even though they don't think Kaido could lose it anyway, but they still have plans for it. So this is just the same thing Vegas does, right, with sports. Like, oh, there's no way this team will lose. But let's make it look, let's put those lines out there so people like, that's alluring, even though I know better, right? It's the same situation. They're just playing both sides. It's been a thing since it's ever been a thing. So it's just very confusing to me. And then on top of that, right, um what Urahara Hat Cypher Paul guy says about the Toby Ropo, the All Stars I understand, with King and Queen being defeated. I understand being shocked about that. I understand that. Regardless of what you think about the Straw Hat Pirates, that would still shock me, right? Even though we as real people know in the story that it's supposed to happen. Um, they shouldn't have been this. He shouldn't have been surprised about the Toby Ropo because they made it sound like they would have low diff Who's Who. Remember we talked about that, like where they were like, "Oh, I'll just go do it myself," like just one of them, right? And then even made the comment, well, he might not survive because he's fighting Jinbei. And if Who's was supposedly the strongest, right, or the most potential, right, other than X Drake, it should have been no shock that they like. I just saw I had it. And I know it's not a huge deal, but you guys know how I am when it comes to Cypher Pole, and I don't trust anything that they say or do or how they move because they're spies and that's how they're supposed to be. So it's just like, well, which one is it? Are you just hyping this up? Because he turns around and says, well, none of those wins matter because they're not. Oh, no, no, no. And because it's not those two, right? Which is true. As long as they walk the planet. you can't continue the story with these two because they're just always going to be in the way. Even Law said that, right? For his route and his information, what he needs to know, he's got to get past people like the Yonko, which there are very few, obviously. So, which to include Shanks. Don't get me started on Law and Shanks, right? But I just thought that was interesting coming from a Cypher Pole agent, right? Yeah. And then while he's talking about this whole situation, we see Big Mom and Law and Useless D Mid in the same metal that they hit her with. She's turned to homies now, and she's just playing with toys and having a good old time out here, just like Kaido at the end of the chapter, because they don't get to do this. People already know not to oppose them, so no one wants to smoke with them anyway, right? Like, nobody on the only person you could even think, right, would even attempt to fight Big Mom is go to Curry. But he's not that type of character. He probably he's well not probably he's getting clapped too. As much as I hate to say that, 'cause that's my guy, but that's Big Mom. It's not going down like that. G, it's just not right, mama. But they're not. It's like I said, Kid is cool, but he's just a terrible matchup for Big Mom, man. Like without Law there, there's no way. There's just a bad matchup. That's all there is to it. Not just the gap in strength, but the matchup thing, because her fruit's too weird. Um, and then we get the little recap thing. Like we're gonna see that, and then the difference between again what was happening in Onigashima, like we've been talking about. The people are unaware of that. At some point, they will be, and with Momo being a symbol of hope as instead of oppression in dragon form, right? They'll see him protecting what dragon, a dragon, not dragon the revolutionary, but what a dragon has done to them since he's came to Wano. And who knows how long Kaido's had that plan to begin with, right? Then we get into some little cool stuff, right? Because we get the mention of what's going on with the Onigashima in the basement and, the same old stuff with the gunpowder and the blowing up. We get another number, and he just gets Ray Lewis. Like, he wasn't even there. And I guess they're going to fight now. And eventually we'll have Yamato intercepting the Kazumbo, which relates to what happens next with the Izo having just a Beasley panel. Like, that was dope. Dropping down some Max Payne, Dante, Deadpool type stuff, Equilibrium, Matrix, whatever you want to call it. Like, Izo's definitely got a V2 rocket and a nuke in every single Call of Duty with pistols only, from what I just saw happen right there. So from one sniper to another, not me, but Izo to Usopp, and knowing who Usopp is, and Usopp is dope, man. He's a brave warrior. Usopp is funny. He's just funny to me because he says the most cowardly stuff while acting brave, and it's just you don't really see much of that. You either see one or the other, right? Someone pretending to be brave and they really not. Usopp knows he's more brave than what he says, and I guess that's how he hypes himself up, But Usopp is what people joke about with Bucky. But Usopp really is that dude. That's the difference. Like Bucky is cool, but Usopp is that guy, man. Usopp is that guy. Shout out to him, man. Syrup Village, man. 200 million, man. But yeah, that panel and then seeing the Kozuki crest on the coat, that was like Admiral. That was almost like when we saw it was almost close to the hype when the scrub dude put Fujitora's coat on, right? When we saw the Admiral coat get put on him, and it just, I was like, man, he's when I see stuff like that, it just hypes up other characters that we haven't seen, like Ben the Beckerman, right? Because eventually pistols and guns have to serve some kind of advantage in the series, right? They haven't been up until this point because the characters' bullets don't matter to them. Like they're gonna have to matter at some point, right? That kind of ties into most stories, right, where you have a lot of characters who use swords. That common thing in history where we went from weapons to, where we went from swords and shields and spears to guns. Like there's a different time period, right? Kenshin does this, quite a few enemies do that because that happened in real life. Um, but seeing that still a character like Izo is dope to me because there's very few. Like Blackbeard and Doflamingo use guns, but not because they have to, and they're not really proficient with them. It's just like, yo, I just want to shoot you because I want to shoot somebody. Like, it's just what they're on. Izo's proficient out here, max stats and just everything you can see. But and we cut the Rise over versus Fukuro Kujo, and yo, hey man, y'all know how I feel about Shikamaru or Shikamaru, whichever pronunciation you prefer. So when I see things that remind me of him, and they're just having Kage Mana, and we're just gonna sit here in the fire. And I like what Fuguro Kujo said though. He was like, "Hey, look, I'll just wait till you burn to death, man. Or we'll just sit here and burn." And Raizo's like, "Yo, man, the hour of legend for me was not too long ago, right? My guy, my sensei, Chad in himself, right? Would fried testicles somehow endure the hour of legend, man. And I ain't never seen nobody do nothing like that. This fire doesn't mean a thing. It's not even Amaterasu, so why do I care? That's probably what Raizo was thinking. Like, yo, I've existed around hotter flames than this. G, this is nothing. We're talking. This is Del Taco mild hot sauce. This is whatever. We're here chatted, and I'm trying not to get hyped. This chapter had me hyped early in the morning. Y'all, I was yelling early. But then we get to Orhochi and Kumagasaki Kun. Shout out to Bleach coming back. Uh, Look, we know what song we're about to get, right? Hey, Mr. DJ. That's exactly. We're gonna get this. Hopefully, the same one we got to the intro to Wano, right? Was the road. Just gave everybody the Mihawk treatment and Black Rope Twister and just all types of just fan servicey anime stuff. But I'm not sure if Orochi is playing a role, right? Because if he already knows about the scabbers, right, why wouldn't he remember that Denjiro should have quote unquote killed Kumarasaki? Now, whether he understands that's Hiyori or not is different, but I just really doubt that he doesn't understand something that's funny because in his mind, he's like trying to hear a song, but he's thinking like Fuku Kujo, you need to hurry up so we can get up on out of here. And he's not talking about taking her with him. Now, a simp like Orhochi, come on, man. If he's not trying to take her with him, then something's up. So he's on to something. He's not that dumb, right? He survived this long on wit and luck, but a lot of wit when it comes to being a shady character. So even in his state, I'm not falling for it, man. This ain't Sanji. Orochi has got some Sanjiisms about him, but he's not that level. I don't think he's buying it. I do think he's gonna do something just based on him thinking more about Fukuro Kujo than Kumurasaki, because for how hard he was simping, remember he was still mad at her. And at the end of the day, he was still mad at her. And guys, y'all know what I'm about to say. Same thing I said about Queen, right? Okay, all right, let's get it. And we get to more cool stuff. Apu running. Mr. Check Your Route himself, dipping, Usain Bolt. I gotta get out of here. I tried to dip from Kizaru. There's no way you guys are as fast as Kizaru, so I should be able to get up on out of here. Not only am I going to be dumb enough to not have my shutter off, I'm going to tell you I'm taking pictures of you. Which, by the way, who is he going to sell these to? That's important. Like, this information is important, but if you think about it in the context of the people in the know, it's literally irrelevant because everybody in the underworld knows what Cypher Pole's on. They might not know exactly which person is a Cypher Pole, but come on, man. Like, this isn't some in the underworld, there's no secrets, right? Look how easily like Big Mom knew about Kambach King. The only other person that has shown that level of information has been all like people at the top. So even if Apu went to somebody, who is he going to, and why would he be able to trust them? Like the more of Apu's movements I see, again, like his infatuation with the numbers for whatever reason, I'm really interested because like a character like Apu, they seem like the type that always still make it towards the end of the series for somehow, some way, right? He's like a caribou, you know. He's a grimy McGrind ball, and honestly, we really don't know how strong he is or isn't because he's one of those characters where we just seen what Cypherpunk can do. All right, Dr. Seuss mask guy probably one shot that number with the the same way that Who's Who was trying to do the Jinbei, basically a Shigan version of just a finger jab to the neck and sent old buddy into a wall, cracked him wide open, and now he's asleep. And I don't know if by the time he did that, that's how long it took Derby had Cypher Polo guy to low diff Drake, because Drake is asleep too. So clearly it's made to look like that he wasn't jumped. Derby had Cypher Polo guy, just that dude, but he still put respect on Drake's name. Now, I will say this. We've seen with zones a lot of times they can get knocked out, they'll change back into human form. He's not in human form. So is he really knocked out fully? Now we had a situation where OT was a little bit different, but we didn't necessarily see her afterwards during that time period. We just saw her again moving around. So I don't know if Drake is really asleep. Is he pretending because it's a cipher pole and they don't know about Sword again because we're still not sure. They know he's a spy, but we don't know if they're aware of Sword. I just assume that they're probably aware of some existence like that. Again, X Drake is not supposed to be here. But he didn't kill X Drake. He knows X Drake ain't dead. So it's like, why leave him alive? Or is he assuming he's dead? Like, Cypher Pulse doesn't seem like they'd make mistakes. So you might as well kill X Drake or take him with you. And if you're, again, this is like the Who's Who thing. We still don't know if they cleaned up that mess. Because we see now the guy called, you know, Urahara Kisuke has Cyberpunk. I called both of them to let them know that King just got defeated and all of everybody else got wiped out. So I don't know which way they're going. We're going with that, but Cypherpole is still out here, man, and so you know what that means, right? It's very interesting with them, especially because of this Wano Annex thing and this 1,000,000 to 1 odds, right? And then we even seen Killer, a panel where Killer, we ain't seen him since post Hawkins, which Hawkins has lost twice in this arc and he didn't die either. So again, these characters just don't go away. But we know Sanji is laid out, Zoro's laying in his own blood, assumedly, right? Again, we saw Killer. Who else did we see? Beppo, Sachi, and Penguin probably fighting some fodder. And then we saw Useless Deep Mid and Law again with Big Mama with the little panel thing. And then so, if the fate of the era is this important, why are we not cleaning up loose ends with some of these characters? Right? Like Apu, I guess because Robin's more important, but they know Apu did something. Like they flat out know that he took photos of them being there. And again, I don't want to you know, overanalyze like how important that is or isn't. It's just odd to me that they just let that fly. So, but at the same time, if Dofi can get a newspaper changed, anything revolving Cypherpole can just like it never happened again. So it's like, well, where's Who's Who gonna do with this information? I have no idea. Yeah, it's just odd to me. It's just like a gag at this point. But then we get to Roof Piece, my man, Cincho, hailing it from the East Blue, the Rubber Band Man, like I used to say, the phenom from Fuchsia. Right? The goat with the coat. Shout out to Ricanti Goat Beard. Monkey D. And my man, hailing in from parts unknown. Look, I'm not going to do it because I already did it earlier. But it's one clap kind of time, right? We've seen conquerors and we've seen people eat each other's attacks. And I like the fact that he got cracked with the same attack that we thought would just one shot him to begin with. He didn't name it, but it looked just like the Three Realms thing he did. That was dope when he spun his mace in the air. For Luffy to take the hit, and I think the reason why he's in base form is because of the hockey efficiency thing. I think we have to. I don't think it's egregious to think of using Rio techniques, right? Outward force hockey, however you want to word it. it has to be extremely inefficient. Especially when you first learn how to use it, right? And we've seen from Luffy, everything is volume, 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 and then he gets efficient with it, just like Gear Fourth and whatnot. So I think that's why he's not using. We talked about this before, even my video like 2 years ago. The stuff he's doing now is exactly who I've been talking about. Like when we first learned about Rio, because this is how he's gonna have to be able to fight Blackbeard, because he's not gonna be able to touch him. So this just made too much sense to me, and for him to be able to apply it in this manner, again, the word divine has been used over and over again, 4 times in this arc related to hockey based attacks. So it's like Luffy now using rock. Like we joke about Oda, how much does he know that I know, and just, random crazy stuff. Obviously, I don't take this serious like that. You guys know that, but it's just fun to say. Um, Luffy is copying Rob Lucci right now. If you think about how like what we know as Rio is what you could assume that Roku Ogon, that's kind of how it works. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cypherpole can do something very similar, right? Um, it just makes too much sense. The way that the six paths techniques function, you could tell, like, again, it could be its own fighting style to begin with, like in its own series, but it's very hockey based. If you think about Tekai and moving with Tekai, you're like that's arm and hockey in a sense, right? And then mantra, right? The different versions of fighting styles are basically all the same. It's just Roku Ogon. Like it's almost I've been saying that for a long time, right? And a real King Kong gun, Roku Ogon. Like I've been saying that. So him saying rock gun is just like okay. When we saw Red Rock, so that's what this means. It's similar to using the word divine for him. That's just a command like with divine swiftness in Yamato or divine departure, aka Getsugu Tencho with Roger, right? Roger Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Luffy is evolving. And one of the things I would talk about is like him being in base form and doing this just makes too much sense. And him changing his attacks to where it's only using Rio on contact to conserve because he's very terrible at hockey efficiency. But when he does use, because Luffy loves Boundo Man, man. He's really proud of Boundo Man. He is. The way he talks about it, the way like he gets mad if you try to clown Gear 4, he's not having it, man. Like he loves Gear 4. Like think about the interaction with Rayleigh, and that's how Luffy thinks about Gear 4, the way he thinks the German are cool. Like he loves Boundo Man. So for him to not be doing this in Boundo Man form means it's something he can probably do instantly. He's already thought about it. So that's if that's gonna be it's gonna be Kong. Rock Kong, whatever, however he's gonna word it, Because at the end of the day, you can bring all the hockey you want, but without the brute force to go along with it, it's not gonna do nothing, right? He's not a swordsman. It works different. I'm excited, man. I still don't think Kaido Soval is not gonna go down. Not due to whatever, because they're having too much fun right now, and you know how it gets with these characters.